Welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is Cultivate Strategic Partnerships with Funders. My name is David Gates and I'm the Director of Education here at GrantStation. Now today's webinar will focus on engaging different types of funders. Now you can use GrantStation to find funders that are perfect for your organization quickly and efficiently. Right now we are in the midst of GrantStation's holiday sale where you can get a 1-year membership for $199 or a 2-year membership for $299. And I'll drop a link for that in the chat shortly. Now your presenter today is Alice Ruhnke. Alice is the president of GrantStation, and having raised over $45 million from federal, state, and private grant makers, she knows what it takes to get funded. And today she's going to share her expertise with you and help you develop partnerships with funders. So please welcome Alice Ruhnke.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, David. And thanks for everyone for being here. We have a nice big crowd today. So I'm super excited about that. And I have lots of information that I want to get to. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right into things. What we're just going to start with is just kind of looking at the funding landscape and what current giving looks like across the US. And then we're going to look at different types of funders that you can approach, and a way to use some of GrantStation's resources to benchmark your efforts so that you can kind of compare yourself against other like organizations to set up your own strategies. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we find those funders that we were looking to engage with. And then we're going to go through different strategies for engaging with foundations, engaging with corporations, and then engaging with different financial institutions like banks and CDFIs and different groups like that that we'll talk about. So then at the very end, we'll have time for question and answers. So like David said, feel free to throw those in the Q&A as we go through, and then we'll get to those at the very end. So every year, Giving USA compiles information on giving to charitable organizations. And they pull this information together and compare it from year to year of what's going on in the funding landscape. Now, they look at, individual giving, bequests, corporate giving, and foundations. So it's not government giving, that's not part of the pie, but the giving by individuals, which if you've kind of followed for a while, you probably know that individual giving has gone down a little bit, even though the total amount has gone up and went up between 2022 and 2023. That is the percentage of individuals giving has crept down a little bit. So obviously it's fewer people giving more dollars. So just to kind of understand what the whole piece of the pie is here, in 2023, giving was $557 billion. And that was an increase over 2022 by these four different groups. Bequests, which are when somebody is passing on and they give money to a nonprofit organization, that has continued to rise as baby boomers are getting to the age of the end of their life. This is kind of anticipated to grow as well, just kind of a great transfer of wealth that's going to be happening as baby boomers transition and pass their dollars down. Then you'll be happy to know that corporate giving and foundation giving both went up from 2022 to 2023. So corporations by about 3% and foundations by about 1.7%. So usually corporate giving waxes and wanes based on the economy, inflation, things like that. And then foundation giving, just as in general terms, usually goes up and down based on when the stock market is good or not so good. But kind of the nice thing overall is that the giving has continued to increase, even if kind of the demographics of who is giving is a little bit different. So when we're looking at kind of what the possible landscape is for where we're going to get dollars to support our organizations, again, we're going to talk today about different foundations and corporations and financial institutions and how we can engage with them. We're not going to talk today about government funding, but obviously that's a big piece of the pie as well, getting money from federal, state, or local governments or Canadian provinces or the Canadian government. You have giving circles that give out dollars. You have donor advised funds, which continue to grow every year, and it's a really popular um, uh, funding kind of mechanism. And then there's all sorts of different associations, like your bar associations and your um, Lions clubs and your Rowatans and those kinds of associations and groups of people who give out dollars together. So we're going to focus a little bit more on these bigger ones up here with, again, foundations, corporations, and financial institutions today. So what can be kind of challenging as we're looking out there and we're saying, okay, I see this, these billions of dollars that you talked about in the pie chart. And I see, that there's all sorts of money out there, right? That people are getting billions and billions of dollars. And I'm a nonprofit at XYZ size, right? And so I don't know how much I should be going for. I don't know how much my peers are getting. I don't know what my strategy should be. So one of the tools that GrantStation has is our benchmarker tool. And every year we do a survey called the State of Grant Seeking Survey. And we put it out to our community. And last year we had 2,300 nonprofits who responded, and they tell us about their grant seeking strategies and how much they applied for and how much they received and what their challenges were and all those sorts of things so that you as a nonprofit can benchmark yourself against like organizations. Because if you're a small, let's say, animal rescue with a budget of under $50,000, you don't want to compare yourself to a hospital and how much money they're bringing in, because that's apples and oranges, right? You want to compare yourself to other organizations that share your mission or other organizations that are the size you are to kind of, again, get that benchmark of what others are doing and what others are getting. And then you can set your strategies from there. So that's where our benchmarker tool comes in. And you can go to our site and read the whole report, which is very interesting, or you can go to our site and just use the benchmarker tool. So there's different ways that you can use it, but the most simple way to use it is just to only answer 2 questions and then start to compare yourself. So you first look at what your budget range is, so whatever your annual budget is, and then you can click on the box for whatever your mission focus is. So I'm just using an example of an organization who has a medium budget, so between $100,000 and $999,999, and a human service organization, right? So that's what we're going to be looking at here. So again, you go on there, all you click is medium budget, uh, human services, and you can start to then benchmark yourself and compare yourself against all of these different comparison points. So, what's the age of the organization? How much money are these organizations getting from grants? How much of their grants are reoccurring grants or are they new grants? How many grants have they submitted in the past year? How many grants did they receive? How large were the grants? So I'm not going to read through the whole list for you, but these are all the comparison points that you can go and look at for apples to apples comparisons between your organization and others and how they did their grant seeking. So I'm just going to show you 2 comparison points and kind of how it looks. So this question was just what percentage of your organization's funding is from grants. So again, it has a different answer for the budget size and then for the mission focus size. So you can see here for human services organizations, the highest percent is 10% or less of funding coming from grants. And then you can see for an organization with that medium budget range, the highest percent is that 22% that have 11 to 25% of their grants from of their funding is from grants. So again, you can see these are fairly well kind of shared across categories with these particular answers from this. Um, and you can again kind of see where you're at and where you might want to strive to be. Here's just another question. Approximately how many grants did your organization submit in 2023? So again, you have human service organizations here. And you can see that there was a lot of grants submitted by human service organizations. So 29% of human service organizations in our survey submitted over 30 grant applications, right? And then again, 28% submitted 3 to 5 for that medium budget size. This last column that you see is just kind of all the respondents, regardless of their budget size or their mission size. So you can kind of just kind of see what some of those differences are. But it's a really good way to kind of get your head wrapped around how how many grants you could be applying for, what your peers are doing, what they're doing successfully, and establishing some of that for yourself as an organization to start to explore. The benchmarker tool is free for anybody to use. You can go on our site, you can click on public resources, and you can go and use the benchmarker tool. If you do have a membership to GrantStation, you can save your benchmarker reports and then, print them off and take them to your board or your development office or your executive director and kind of start to have some of these conversations of, again, trying to look at what you could be doing as an organization in your grant seeking. So now that we kind of have a little bit of the lay of the land of how much we're going to do or what our, looking at kind of how much we might be looking to apply for, how do we kind of start that process? And the first part of that process is what's called primary research. And primary research is where you're just generating that list of funders to continue to explore. And so again, I had this on a different slide where you have those government funders, foundations, corporations, donor advised funds, associations. So there's a lot of a list to pick from. And with something like GrantStation, you have access to those databases that will help you find those funders to continue to research and refine and then build relationships with. So the first step is kind of just finding what is out there for my nonprofit to apply for based on my mission, my location, based on my target populations of who I serve. You can search by looking for different types of support, like I'm looking for general operating support, or I'm looking for program support, or I'm looking for equipment, or capacity building grants, or all sorts of different things. You can look in all these different ways through our database. Um, you can also take a look if you're and you have to be a member to look at our databases, but you can also take a look at the search terms if you're a member or not to kind of get an idea of the different categories that funders are funding so that you can, again, kind of look at that idea of what you do and what your kind of mission focus is and what your programs are focused on and where, how funders are categorizing those terms so that you can, again, search using the terms that funders are using. So that when you're out there looking and doing that primary research, you know that you're looking under the right terms. Once you kind of get that list of funders, right? And so then the next step in the process is to start that secondary research where you really start digging into some of that funder's information to really decide if there's a good fit between your organization and what you're trying to accomplish and what that funder is trying to accomplish, right? So funders are also just nonprofits, just like us, that have mission focus, and they really, you're their legs out in the community. You're the ones getting the work done, and they're the ones that support you based on the areas of interest that they have, just like you have as part of your mission. So some of the great, ways to go and look at that secondary research is to go to their different websites and explore more about what their different areas of interest are. They usually have application guidelines on those websites that you can again take a look at and see, how involved the different applications are. Looking at their tax forms is a really great way to find out who was funded by that funder previously and what grants were awarded and for how much money in the past. And so that's a nice way to kind of, look at how a funder is funding. So a funder might give out $1 million a year, but they might give out two $500,000 grants, which would look very different from them giving out, my math's going to be wrong, but $10,000 grants, right? That would just look very different. So in looking at their tax forms, you can see what grants were awarded, so that you can again adjust your strategy appropriately. And then their annual reports are also great to read. Sometimes the grants awarded are in there as well, or just additional information on what their grantees achieved in the last year. So again, you're getting that really good idea if you have that alignment with the funder. The work that you're doing, does it match up with what they want to do? Um, so again, all of these things, if you do have a grant station membership, are on the profiles for our funders. Um, so as you're out there looking for those foundations and starting to develop those relationships, so now you kind of know, right, who is out there, who you really kind of match up with, and how. Now we're going to talk about how we would go out and develop some of those relationships. And one of the things that I want you really to consider is that I know that everybody immediately says, I want money. And of course, we do want money to support the programs that we're offering. But also realize that funders have a lot of other resources and value, that you want to connect in with them as well. That they have a lot of information about what's going on in the community and who to partner with. They have a lot of volunteer opportunities. They really have an expertise in a lot of their, if it's their content area or just their community that they maybe live and serve in. They provide trainings and make connections for you. um, you know, they can do some advertising for the work that you're doing and again put your services out there in connection with some of their other services. So, think broadly as you're out there building these relationships because, yes, money is important and yes, that is something that we're going to try to get from funders, but there's other things that we can get, and we don't want to be just so focused in on one thing that we miss out on the opportunity to maybe get some great training that we need, at a no cost or low cost, or to be connected in with partners who can support us at a greater level, and those kinds of things. So think more broadly than money and think about how these organizations, these funders, can really support the work that you do, and look broadly at that. So as you're kind of out there developing those relationships, it really is funding is a relationship building process. There's no magic bullet that I can really tell you. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, investment of human resources and goodwill and, collaboration and community engagement and all those sorts of things. But as you're kind of out there building those relationships with the funders, just some things to kind of think about. One is that, when I was looking, had that slide on secondary research where you could look at their annual report or their website or their old tax forms or things like that. Kind of doing that research up front is going to just have more credibility to you when you do start to engage with them, right? You don't want to ask them questions that you could get answered simply by going to their website or reading an annual report, right? You want to take that information, connect it in with what you're doing, and then go out and build that relationship, right? So show them that you've done your research, that you've done the work, and that you feel that you're a really good connection with that foundation for whatever reasons that you're thinking that you're that good connection. There's lots of different ways to make those connections. There obviously is just, simply applying for grants, which, we can do online. And then just doing other, networking events in your community, going to different conferences. Funders are very frequently at conferences sharing what they do and what they want to invest in and all those sorts of things. So they're, always out there sharing their information at things like that, and you can make those connections. Um, if they have different learning events or meetings, I know that, we're all very Zoom oriented now. Used to be in the past, they would have meetings where maybe you come collectively together. Now there's a combination of, learning online versus learning in person. But lots of different opportunities to just get out there and meet those funders and connect with them like that. So really, really important to make that engagement. Um, and then kind of staying connected with them over time. A lot of times funders will give you some advice of things that they really recommend that you do as first steps. I really encourage you to go out, take their advice, do what they ask you to do, research the partnerships that they're asking you to research or connect with their grantees if that's what they're asking you to do. And then, go back with lessons learned and what the next steps are and those kinds of things. You can keep them engaged by inviting them to different events you may have in the community or galas that you have or events where you're kind of showcasing or able to showcase your services, right? Where engaging them to come in and see how your organization operates is a really, really powerful way to engage a funder for them to see you in action, right? So you can, stay connected in those ways. And then also just staying in, things that go really well. You get a great article in the paper, or you have some really great press or some social media out there. Share that with them. Keep your name in front of them. Show them how you're engaged in the community. And all of these kinds of ways will just build a bigger connection for those funding streams down the road. Okay, so that's some of our foundations that we're looking at. And now we're going to move a little bit more towards some corporate giving models and what those look like. And so there's different ways you can see on this page here how corporations give. And I'm going to kind of go through these and talk about how we would connect in with these different areas, and where there's kind of some differences among these kinds of models. Now, not every corporation has all of these models, but these are just different corporation models. They could have them all, but probably they have a select group of these. So let's look first at direct giving. Very simple and straightforward. The corporation is giving money directly from their corporate budgets directly to your nonprofit for whatever it is that they want to support, right? So it could be money for your operations, it could be money for uh, your cause, it could be, any sort of thing that the corporation directly is giving you dollars, right? The second part of that is the corporate foundation giving. Now, in the direct giving, the corporation gave you the money. A lot of corporations have a corporate foundation that is set up with its own 501(c)(3) status, its own organization. It has its own board, and usually it focuses relatively on some of the same things that the corporation might focus on. So, a car dealership as a corporation might support things around safe driving as a corporate foundation, those kinds of things. Um, and so, with a corporate foundation, that's usually very much kind of in line with working with regular foundations that I was just speaking about, where they have open processes where you can apply for grants. They have their own staff and budgets, and they award on a consistent basis if it's annual or quarterly or whatever, but giving out throughout the year. In-kind donations is when the corporation provides support to you if it's from materials and donations of products, if it's from furniture and computer equipment that they maybe have left over, if it's them providing you with space at a discounted rate or for free or things like that, where you can use facilities for your events and not have to pay a charge for them, and they're donated in kind to your organization. But one of the biggest thing that corporations are really focusing on right now is providing the support of their employees to provide their professional services in the community to support your nonprofit. So it could be that a corporation is providing money for their marketing department to go out and do a marketing campaign for your nonprofit. And they're going to, do a new logo design and, all the kind of website and refresh all of your stuff using those professional services that that corporation has through their staff. Or their staff maybe has legal expertise and they can come into your nonprofit and help provide you with that legal expertise that you may need in human resources or tax support or different things like that. So that money, again, while there's no actual dollars changing hands, it's money that you don't have to raise elsewhere, right? It is an incredible value that you want to kind of keep documented and keep realizing that these in-kind donations can really support your organization. Even if it's not direct cash in your pocket. Um, then there's all sorts of matching gifts that corporations give, where when their employees give, then they match that gift. And that's, as an employee, that always feels really good when you give, and then the corporation's going to double that donation, or, even more than that at times. So there's always matching gift money left at the table, if you will, that people don't remember to connect in with their donations from the community, and do their corporations or their businesses provide matching funds. And there's billions of dollars left on the table every year because nonprofits aren't exploring that option. Um, the volunteer grants, actually, that is something that I really, I think must be a little bit new that I hadn't really heard of, where companies are kind of providing wherever. Well, I guess I do kind of hear this a little bit, but it's like they wherever their employees are giving their time, their own volunteer time, that's when the foundation or the corporation will come in and then provide monies to that nonprofit organization. So if their employees are, doing that work by themselves in the community, then the corporations come in and give some money to support that work. Um, then corporate sponsorship, that's something that you're probably very familiar with, where you're having, again, an event, a gala, or a run, a walk, a different thing, and companies sponsor you. That money usually comes from the corporation and from their marketing department, right? That's usually where that comes from. What they're looking to do is get that recognition as good communities players. The other two are cause-related marketing, where you are connecting in with a nonprofit, with a for-profit and a nonprofit, and maybe the for-profit is selling an item, and the nonprofit is going to get maybe all the revenue or a percentage of the revenue from those items. And so you're kind of really connecting in with that corporation. You're building a partnership. These will take some time. You want to make sure that whoever you're connecting yourself with, that you've done your homework, that you know who they are and what they value and all those kinds of things. Because once you put your name with them, if there's bad press for them, there's going to be bad press for you, right? So this is something that will take some time, but you can really get a lot of kind of aligning your missions together. And then community investing is usually on a bigger kind of scale of, a Starbucks does this kind of work where they come in and work and develop social enterprises within your community, or they give low interest loans to nonprofits doing big work, and that sort of thing. So different models that way. So, as we're out there, kind of knowing all of that, how are we going to get out there and engage with those corporations? Again, the easiest is through those product donations. It's usually a very simple process. Again, in our database, you can just look for funders who do product donations. Usually, those forms are very simple, and you just ask for what you need, and it's not a really cumbersome process. And it can be that first stepping stone to getting other grant dollars or volunteers or corporate support down the road. And then as you're going out to connect with that corporation, right, and starting to make these partnerships, really focusing in on what that alignment is between, again, your organization and their business, right? Where is that connect? If it's in mission or values or community or whatever, where's that intersection? And always kind of going out there to sell that intersection between you and that corporation or business as you're going out there. And also realizing that corporations have reasons that they give, right? And so is your project going to help them get more publicity? Is it going to give them some credibility in the community when you advertise kind of for them that you're partnering? Are you going to give them more exposure and more sales because of, the advertising that you're doing for them? So always keeping in mind that they are going to want that kind of this for that, right? That they're going to always want you to be thinking about how you're going to benefit them if they're going to benefit you, financially, right? And kind of being pre-prepared as to how you're going to provide um, that publicity, or where you're going to put their logo on your website or on your t-shirts or on your banners or whatever, and always kind of pre-think that through so that you can share that with them from the beginning of developing that relationship. Um, and then just making that strong case for support for your own organization, who you are and who you serve, and why, just like any other funder, why would they want to fund you? The good work that you do, and being able to present that information, the difference that you make in the community, the difference that the change that occurs because of your programs, because of your services, those sorts of things, and being able to communicate that pretty simply and succinctly to the corporation when you're meeting with them. So lots of different kinds of angles to look at, but really, again, the key message here is being very prepared to engage with them. And then, again, how does it benefit you? How does it benefit them? And being prepared to have that discussion out with corporations and businesses. The last set that we're going to talk about of funders is looking at different financial institutions. So there's different types of financial institutions, and so we're going to kind of go through each one and kind of what they are and how they differ a little bit from one another. So there's what's called CDFIs, which are Community Development Financial Institutions. Okay, they're all across the United States. We'll talk about them a bit. You have your credit unions out there doing work. You have minority depository institutions, MDIs, and then you have all sorts of your retail banks out there doing work and providing funds. So let's talk about some of the differences and how we can find these groups and that sort of thing. So we're going to start with the CDFIs, the Community Development Financial Institutions. And like I said, they're across the country, and their goal is to expand economic opportunity in low income communities. And they usually provide like financial services to either, it could be to businesses, that's their focus. It could be to local residents as part of their focus to say, build low income housing or to do renovations on housing or to build multi family homes and apartments and things like that. And so they have different kind of areas that they focus in on when they apply to become a CDFI. They focus in on different things. And then a lot of them focus in on business development. So they're in the community offering different trainings, support, loans, all sorts of things for businesses to get started and get engaged, especially in low income communities. So a CDFI could be a nonprofit, it could be a bank, it could be a credit union. They might have loans, they might give out actual dollars, they might give out what's it called, like rotating dollars that an organization gets, and they invested in this housing development first, and then they get the money back and they keep reinvesting it in the community and things like that. So there's lots of different types of CDFIs, and you can go to this link, although I think that this link is different on my most recent slides. So when you get the slides, you will see this link instead, and it has the different CDFIs and which states they're in, what areas they focus on, that sort of thing, and what they kind of give. If it's, again, money, if it's support, if it's technical assistance, if it's training, all sorts of things like that. Then you have your credit unions, right, where members, pool their money and make cooperative decisions on, how things are kind of spent. Um, they really are there to serve their members as opposed to serving their communities. When we talk about retail banks, those would be more to serve their communities, whereas credit unions are there to serve their members. And they can be really small, volunteer credit unions all the way up to multi-million dollar credit unions. So there's a lot of differences out there amongst credit unions, but connecting in with different credit unions can help you to figure out how they're serving your community. And then the minority depository institutions, the MDIs, they're kind of similar to the CDFIs, where they're also very mission driven, like the CDFIs. And they are, owned and operated by the minority population that they're serving. And so investing right back into their communities. A lot of, again, low income borrowers, and looking at, how to develop, first time housing, how to support people in making down payments, um, how to look at different things, and work on credit issues, all those sorts of things to really, boost home ownership and things like that in those minority communities. So again, it could be that they're giving out financial dollars for down payments and things like that. It could be that they're providing that free training to help people get credit worthy ready, all those sorts of things. So lots of different opportunities through those. And again, you can take a look at this link when you get that. And then finally, we have, what we kind of probably fall back on when we just think of financial institutions, and that's just our retail banks, right? That they can be local, they can have a local presence, a regional presence, they can be all across the country, all that sort of thing. And so you obviously know your own banks that are in your communities. But what's really important to understand is that those banks in your local community work under what's called the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, right? And so it because of redlining that went on, where they would not allow certain areas to get access to loans, certain people, certain groups, and they would do the redlining, and you couldn't get access to any sorts of funds to buy a house, to start a business, to do all those things. This was enacted in order to start to alleviate that. So it requires banks to give back to the communities that they are in, and to specifically focus on low and moderate income communities and the folks in those communities that are LMI. You'll hear that a lot, low and moderate income, right? And so this is an intentional way to make sure that these banks are giving back to those communities. So through the Community Reinvestment Act, again, there's lots of different opportunities that are out there depending on the retail bank that you're working with. But they might have, grants that they give out, or no or low interest loans that they give out. And they support a variety of different things that might be around health and education in the community, lots of support around housing, and again, home ownership, things like that. Different sorts of community development projects of, developing safe places for kids, or, outdoor parks, or different things in LMI communities, renovating and expanding, on different, again, uh, buildings that the community would use, or again, larger types of multi-unit housing and things like that. They also provide a lot of just technical assistance in, helping nonprofits um, with financial literacy programs, helping them just in their own development, helping them connect in with other partners. I've worked a lot with banks who, with different, like, especially housing organizations that were my clients. The banks would provide a lot of that training that they wanted for free, for their participants to get the services that they need for financial literacy. And then they also might have that economic development kind of focus. So instead of maybe now they could do both, but instead of focusing on the individuals in the community, it could be more about job training in the community, or creating jobs, or starting small businesses, and those sorts of things. So there's lots of good things that come from those retail banks. And just for our kind of last little hurrah here of building those relationships with these community banks, start to tap your networks, attend events that they may have, invite your CRA representative from your local bank. to your events like you would a funder, like we were talking about earlier. Find out who that person is. That's what they're there for, is to do that investment back in the community. And then just again, a lot of things that I've already kind of said with some of the other partners, but when you're going in to meet with that community representative, to again having that understanding of who you are and what you do and why you make a difference in your community, being able to share that story again very easily. With just a couple pages, because they're not going to read a whole 20-page document, and then also just really having done your research about what that bank's history is in your community. How long have they been there? What kinds of things have they supported? What services are they providing to nonprofits? What services are they providing directly to LMI members of the community? Where they really see their social responsibility at, if it's again in housing or job development or whatever, where their focus is, and kind of establishing that meeting with someone in those departments. And again, with all of these, it's about showing that alignment, showing how, your organization and your mission and what you do aligns with what they're trying to do. So I think with all of that, we have about 10 minutes left for some questions. So I'm going to get a drink of water and then we will start to have some questions and answers.
Perfect. Thank you, Alice. So there are a few questions already in the Q&A. Some of them are pretty aligned with one another, so we're just going to kind of combine those as we go through. But if you do have any questions, hop over to the Q&A and we'll answer as many as we have time for. So there were a few questions about kind of getting exposure for your nonprofits when you're
Okay.
building these relationships that were a bit more specific. One was about situations where there's maybe lots of competition and how you standing out when
Yes.
there's lots of competitions, or other situations where maybe you're a national organization and you don't have as much local contacts. Could you speak to a little bit about those?
Yeah, so it always is a challenge when you're a national organization and then you're trying to get funding at a local level, because those funders, if it's foundations or corporations or banks or, whatever kind of group you're looking at, they're going to want to say, okay, but you have to tell me how this is going to impact my local community. Right? And so that is always a challenge, but that's part of the pre-work that you will do and be able to share with them the difference that you will make in their community for the people in their community. So you're going to have to kind of design that as part of your process to make sure you can tell that story. Um, and what was the first part of the question there, David?
It was the other one was situations where it's more competition, but then just
Oh, more competition.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep, and so that kind of part, again, that's, doing some of your own strengths-based kind of look at your organization, really looking at your organization, what makes you unique in the space that you're in? How are you different from other organizations? How do you collaborate with other organizations? And those sorts of things. And so I think you just have to have that really great, what makes us unique? What makes us the best in our world? Those kinds of conversations that you can start to tease out information about what makes you the best organization to support, and to be able to communicate that to the whichever kind of funder that you're looking at.
Mhm.
And again, that takes work about, developing what have you achieved in the past, how you've changed people's lives, being able to share that information, in a way that's easy for people to understand, that's just, again, very succinct, and you can show how you've changed people's lives or changed the community and those sorts of things. So I just think you have to really go with where your strengths are, what difference you make in the community, and then get that down to a really tight kind of pitch to give to the different funders to get in the door.
Yeah. Makes sense. Then there were quite a few questions about actually identifying points of contact for various organizations. Um,
Okay.
these would be situations when maybe it's not explicitly stated on the website, or maybe there are more kind of recluse funder, or maybe
Yeah.
they're national funders.
Yeah. So it is a little bit hard. Sometimes you will find funders that really don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
Sadly, it's really just true, right? And I don't have any answer for that. One of the things that, again, I come back to Grant Station quite a bit, but we like to just post those funders who are actively accepting applications on our website, because then that's the funders who are the most engaged, and they will, allow you to apply to them, connect with them in various ways, those sorts of things. Um, with national funders, I think that they do tend to have more contacts. So looking at any ways that, they tend to have more access, I guess is what I would say. They have more staff, they, are out in the community more. So taking any of your contacts, your own stakeholders, your board, your volunteers, your staff, those kinds of things. See if you can find any connection to that foundation's board or staff or volunteers, and see if you can do any sort of personal connection as kind of a starting point. And then, also just reaching out to see if they do allow you to, submit that short concept paper or letter of inquiry, where again, you want to get right to the point of the difference you make and your strengths, and why you're the best organization to get a look from them. But those would be ways I would go about with
Mhm.
national foundations.
And would that kind of be the same for those invitation only applications?
Yes, and with those as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was
yeah,
one question
yeah,
related to that.
yeah.
And then there were kind of a few questions about maybe that initial outreach or that ongoing outreach. Things about what is the best way to kind of introduce yourself, what do donors want to know, but then also what are the best practices in ongoing communication?
So I think as you're kind of out there, again, I think that you want to ask the funder for a set amount of time. I'm looking for a half hour of your time, or whatever kind of that set sort of thing is, to kind of have your agenda be pre-prepared for, again, knowing the answers to who they are and what they've funded in the past, and having all that information already in your head, and then going to them with, again, that simple kind of, here's how we are aligned, here's how our missions cross, here's how our values cross, and why, again, what work you do and how you make a difference in the space that you do. So it's about, it's always about storytelling, it's always about, trying to find that connection with the funder. But again, just have that set kind of time that you're going in, and then have things pre-prepared, and don't waste time on things that you could do your own research on.
Makes sense. And we did have one other presenter at one point who mentioned in terms of ongoing communication where it would be, just asking a point of contact for permission to, send updates in the future. Um,
Yeah,
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 and a lot of funders might say yes to things like that. And then that
yes,
gives you an in to just, send those quarterly updates, and obviously not something over the top, but I think that could also be a good practice for that ongoing communication.
absolutely,
Hmm.
absolutely. Yeah, keep it simple, right?
Yep.
Don't bombard them, but keep your name in their purview somewhere.
Yep,
Yep,
absolutely. And yeah, someone in the comments just said, reach out, come prepared, be precise, and abide by guidelines and build relationships whenever and wherever you can. So I think that's just kind of, um, you
that's
know,
perfect. I need
that's
to copy that answer.
as best of a kind of magic bullet as you can kind of get there. Um,
Absolutely.
then Stephen asks, can you discuss the value of having grant writers versus program staff cultivating these relationships?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. So one of the things that I did when I was a grant consultant, I did not make relationships with funders. People would hire me. I didn't work for their company. I worked on contract for their company. But I did not reach out to funders unless it was some sort of technical question about, you know, getting access to the application or a question about the way a budget should be presented or something. And I wanted the program staff to develop those relationships because the funder, if they came back to me with questions, I'm not as intimately connected to these programs as the program staff is. And so I always, that was kind of their job to build the relationships because I was going to walk away at the end, right? I'm not going to be a part of the relationship, and the people at the organization were. So I really encourage you to have the program staff, it's their relationship with the funder and have them do that outreach. And you can be the best person standing behind that program person to provide the information the way that a funder wants it. A grant writer is the best person to have right behind them, supporting them. But have the program staff do it.
Yep, makes sense. Mark says, where will we go to find things like DAFs or financial institutions, attorneys at law, or financial advisors?
Yeah. So that is for the donor advised funds. That is kind of something that is still a nut to crack. That donor advised funds are when somebody gives money, usually to like a community foundation, or they might give it to a financial advisor. And when they give that money and start that DAF, they get the tax write off immediately, but they don't necessarily have to give the money out immediately. Well, they have to give the money to the to the
Hmm.
community foundation or the financial institution, but they don't have to get it out into the community necessarily right away. And that's kind of the harder part. Like what I've kind of had to do is really almost just, it's been a step-by-step process of like, I have to look at each community foundation. I have to see what DAFs they have, try to find out information on them, or even the same with financial, institutions or financial advisors, who has those. So that unfortunately is something that has yet to be figured out easily by any of us in the nonprofit community. And it's been, something that you have to kind of do individually at this point.
Okay, makes
Yeah.
sense. And then Kayla asks, is there a conflict of interest on the part of the company if they have funded you and then accept invitations to your event, dinners to your events? I thought funders were not supposed to accept gifts.
So when that is, so it really isn't a conflict of interest for that, but usually what would happen if a funder gave you some money and let's say for a gala and the company had 10 people that came to the gala, they would knock off the amount of whatever was provided in like food or what was provided back to the funder, right? So that's part of like when your gift acceptance is that when you're providing those receipts to the funder that you're taking off the cost of anything that they received. So that's usually how that's handled,
Hmm.
that part of the donation is not a write-off because it was actually the food they ate. But
Yeah.
the rest of it is a donation. And so you usually make that distinction when you give them that gift receipt.
Okay. And then I think we have time for one last question from
Okay.
Wendy. In my small nonprofit where I'm the sole staff person in the development department, how would you advise for communications with funders, keeping relationships ongoing?
Yeah, so that is always hard, Wendy, because when we're the only person, it's really, really hard to do all this work, right? So I think that, just as much as possible, putting it as part of a networking type of situation, the more you can kind of, um, network with one group but have connections to many groups, is one way to kind of do it. Try to keep, those personal connections with lunch or a dinner or those kinds of things, at different times. Um, but that is just super challenging. Is that there's only so many hours in a day, and so you just want to try to maximize your time as much as possible. So
Mhm.
maybe, sending out quarterly updates, and then once a year trying to connect with them at an event or something like that would be something that would be sufficient, because you don't want to hound them either.
Visit GrantStation to see our latest online education offerings in the form of live webinars, interactive workshops, and on-demand learning. GrantStation.com, your fast track to funding and online education.